There's another piece of this at which I'm sort of agog, and that I think could bear some sustained attention, even with everything else that's going on. Because this real catastrophe for the rule of law that we have seen in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., where the functions of that office, including in cases where there's already been, multiple unanimous jury verdicts on multiple felonies, I mean, the functions of that prosecutor's office have been taken over to instead serve the president. So we're witnessing this catastrophe at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. But we're also learning that that's not the only pressure point that President Trump and Attorney General William Barr have chosen for this operation. I mean, in theory, any federal prosecutor's office could end up with a case or cases that directly impinged on the president's interests. But outside of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., which, of course, is the seat of our federal government, the one federal U.S. Attorney's Office, the one federal prosecutor's office where cases that affect the president or cases that have real national importance tend to end up is in New York City, in the Southern District of New York, largest U.S. Attorney's Office in the country outside of Washington, D.C. It's the office that handles lots of matters of national security, any crimes having to do with anything financial, since New York is the financial capital of the country. In the case of this president, SDNY is also where anything will end up that has to do with his personal home base as a lifelong New Yorker who ran his fraudulent charity and his family business here. The Southern District of New York has long had a reputation for fierce independence, even ornery levels of independence, an unwillingness to subject themselves to direction or influence from Main Justice in Washington. They are the sovereign district of New York. They do whatever they want. But under this administration, the pressure, even on SDNY, has reportedly been pretty intense. Erica Orden and Kara Scannell at CNN had reporting this weekend on Attorney General William Barr attempting to, quote, micromanage numerous cases at SDNY since he's been Attorney General. And reporting on this subject has been coming in from multiple sources, been coming in sort of dribs and drabs. But it's a very worrying thing to learn about, even in small bits, given the list of cases that SDNY is reportedly handling that are of concern to the president. I mean, the Attorney General trying to micromanage cases at SDNY in particular is potentially a very big deal. I mean, there's been solid public reporting from multiple sources on Barr personally intervening to try to stop the prosecution of a Turkish bank. SDNY was going to bring criminal charges against a Turkish bank. But Barr reportedly personally intervened to try to stop those charges from being brought after President Trump told the Turkish president that he'd have Bill Barr fix that case for him. SDNY is also reportedly investigating potential criminal activity related to the Trump Inaugural Committee. SDNY is reportedly investigating potential criminal activity by the Trump Organization, the president's family business. SDNY is reportedly investigating potential criminal behavior by the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. We'll have more on that in a moment. SDNY put the president's other personal attorney, Michael Cohen, in prison for the hush money case involving payments made to benefit the president's campaign just before the 2016 election. The New York Times has reported in the last few days that among the SDNY cases where William Barr has personally inserted himself is that hush money case, the Michael Cohen case, the one that resulted in charges ultimately against no one else. Quote, while Mr. Trump's longtime fixer, Michael Cohen, had already pled guilty to campaign finance violations for his role in those payments, prosecutors were still investigating whether the role of Trump's family business had obstructed whether the role of executives at the Trump family business had obstructed the investigation. Quote, at one point during discussions about the scope of campaign finance laws, Attorney General William Barr questioned the legal theory behind Cohen's case. He also questioned whether such cases could be prosecuted civilly rather than criminally. According to the New York Times, this intervention by Barr in the hush money case took place shortly after he was sworn in as Attorney General last February. Well, honestly, that matches up in the timeline with how the hush money case fell apart and why it is that Michael Cohen ended up being the only person who got in trouble for that, even though he clearly wasn't the one who dreamed it up and he wasn't even the one who benefited from the scheme. I mean, with the benefit of this new reporting, about what William Barr has been doing in the Justice Department to influence cases that relate to the president. With the benefit of this new reporting that Barr got sworn in as the new attorney general and then immediately went down to SDNY to see what he could do about the Michael Cohen hush money case and whether or not it was also going to result in charges against the president's business. I mean, look back now at the initial reporting about how that case got dropped. It was CNN who was first to report this summer in July. Same reporters who are reporting on it now, Erica Orden and Kara Scannell. They were first to report last July that despite the fact that prosecutors had indicated that more charges might be coming in that case, despite the fact that prosecutors had said this was an ongoing law enforcement matter and an ongoing investigation, in July, prosecutors told the judge quietly in that case that there would be no more charges. The whole thing was over, case closed. What CNN reported at that time when they were first to break that story is that the case had appeared to drop off a cliff several months earlier. CNN reported that at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2019, prosecutors had requested interviews with executives at the Trump Organization. But despite the fact that they'd asked for those interviews, they, quote, never followed up on their initial request, and the interviews never took place. Why would prosecutors ask Trump Organization executives for interviews and then never bother to follow up, even when they didn't get an answer? Officials at the Trump Organization also told CNN that although prosecutors had been in contact with them about that case at its outset, their contact with those prosecutors suddenly ended with no explanation at the time as to why. This was July reporting from CNN. CNN said, quote, there has been no contact between that Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office and officials at the Trump Organization in more than 5 months. Well, so it kind of seems like in 5 months before this reporting in July is when that case, potentially involving the president's business, that's when it fell off a cliff. Well, 5 months before that article was published is when William Barr was sworn in as Attorney General of the United States. And we now know from new reporting that as soon as he was sworn in as Attorney General of the United States, he immediately set off to go to SDNY to go meet with the prosecutors in that office to tell them that the whole hush money case was based on a flawed legal premise and it maybe shouldn't have even been brought as a criminal case at all. And yes, all indications are that the Trump family business was in the crosshairs of that criminal investigation until that point. But then suddenly the case went off a cliff. Suddenly the outstanding requests for Trump Organization executives to do interviews with prosecutors, they let them go. The ongoing communication between prosecutors and the president's business, it just ended with no explanation. Around the time that William Barr went to SDNY and told them what he thought about that case. And then quietly the case got closed. And when that case got closed, that prompted me at the time, I remember, and a bunch of other people, to ask publicly in that moment, hey, SDNY, are you okay? Hey, famously independent, unpush-aroundable, uninfluenceable, sovereign District of New York. Hey, SDNY, are you okay? Could you let us know if you're not? Could you let us know if you're being improperly pressured by the Attorney General to make law enforcement decisions in a way that benefits the president? Could you let us know? Well, now today, a new revelation, a new admission from the Justice Department shows us exactly what's been going on there, and it is a doozy. And that's next.